Hi, everybody. My name is Brad Kruger, System Vice President of Patient Experience and Advocate at Aurora Health. Very excited to be here and to talk to all of you about a very relevant topic, COVID-19. What I'd like to do is share a little bit about our journey as a healthcare system in the pandemic, and talk specifically about how we address some of those challenges from both a safety perspective as well as a consumer perspective on things like visitation policy, masking, safety, cleanliness. So to provide some levity to a very serious topic, the name of the presentation, COVID and Visits and Masks. Oh my. So what I'd like to do first is share a little bit about our organization and who we are. So one of those components that helps to keep us focused during this challenging time is our purpose. So we help people live well, and this statement has really helped to guide us through some very challenging times, not just at the beginning, back in March and April, when the pandemic was starting, but also recently. So our organization stretches from northern Wisconsin to the south side of Chicago. So as we know, in a time of escalation with COVID-19, Wisconsin is definitely one of those hotspots. So we have recently moved back to no visitation status, and I'll share a little bit about the decision making and the impact that it's had on the consumers, patients, their families, loved ones, and also employees. So as part of that decision making, we know at the end of the day, our purpose statement helps to guide us, and that is we help people live well. Our values help to guide us too, especially during this challenging time. Our first one, excellence. So we are a top performer in all that we do. Compassion, we unselfishly care for others, and respect. We value the unique needs and preferences of all people. And I'll share a little bit about how the values help to shape the decision making and also impacted us significantly as we started to assess the changes that occurred due to visitation and masking. And when it comes to respect and the unique needs and preferences of all people, how to take those into account in a real time, and also how to assess. I'll share a little bit about that. Health equity is a primary focus, and we started to see some how the decisions on visitation, with all good intent, focused on safety, played out differently based in different demographics, especially if you were to think about our footprint. Again, northern Wisconsin, smaller rural. Then as you come down the state, in Milwaukee, the largest city in the state. And then as we transition to Illinois, again, large hospitals. And then as we get down into Chicago, again, large urban. So we have very distinct patient populations. And as we attributed then similar and consistent policies and procedures and safety guidelines, how did those impact different demographics across the footprint? So we'll touch a little bit on that in the presentation. So again, the size and scope, 28 hospitals. You can see we have 74,000 employees, and we call team members, over 10,000 volunteers in the organization, over 8,000 physicians. And we serve over 3 million unique patients. So a little bit about our journey and how we're bringing a voice of the customers in healthcare. So this is what we did was just did an assessment where we are in the journey, moving from a patient-centric to a consumer-centric, and then as we look out ahead, how do we move to a relationship centric? So how do we build those relationships in a way that have open lines of communication, are very respectful, and especially as we think through our purpose statement, how do we help people live well? How do we utilize those relationships to help improve the health of not just the individual, but the communities that we serve? Also on the journey to go from satisfaction to experience into loyalty, we're pretty far along that curve. As a true north measure, we really focus on a loyalty, likelihood to recommend. And as we build our operations, as we build our scoring, as we build the reporting, really focus on those key segments that drive loyalty. And now moving to the feedback. Historically, we've been more of a retrospective from our survey process to how we cultivate and aggregate feedback, really looking back in time retrospectively through a lot of initiatives, and some of which I'll touch on in the presentation, moving to more of a real-time feedback process. So how to engage and support the relationships in a real time, and then as how to use that information and move to more of a predictive model. So how to utilize the electronic health record, also historical feedback from patients, and how do we then build that into operations, and we can help to guide the care planning through predictive modeling. And again, as we move to different segments of products in our consumer journey, how do we integrate that into a voice of the consumer platform, and ultimately then how do we move into an integrated ecosystem? So again, that omni-channel feedback is critical. So how do we then aggregate all of the feedback that we get from so many different components within the organization? How do we aggregate that and turn that into an effective ecosystem that we can help improve not just the care that we provide to individuals, but the care that we provide to all. So again, and again, to sort of talk about the pandemic, how are consumers responding? So this information is from NRC, and it's from NRC in May. So if you were to go back in time, consumers are feeling comfortable to visit their doctor, only 24%. So again, if you were to stop and think how much care could be provided and how much care is not being provided based on the level of consumer sentiment and of feeling comfortable coming back into the healthcare arena. Also, we know that 52% of consumers have delayed healthcare services for themselves or somebody in their household. A little story that I'll share from one of our hospitals. A patient came in. It was about in April. Again, if you were to go back in time, it was about a month and a half into the pandemic. Come to find out, came into the emergency room and with an infected gallbladder. So it was so infected, in fact, had to have urgent surgery, and then had to go into the ICU for a couple of days before coming out and going into a step-down unit. But if you were to stop and think about that, so in talking with the patient, he did feel pain about 4 weeks prior because of the pandemic did not come in. Just toughed it out and it got into a major infection. So as you stop and think about that one example, people delaying care, so what they would have gone in historically to get treated, and in this case would have been a simple outpatient procedure and sent home. And after observation, this one turned into an ICU stay plus additional hospital days. So you can start to see the impact of how delayed care can affect not just individuals, but the community. We know that 34% of consumers have had a virtual or e-visit in the past 3 months. So at Advocate Aurora, our stretch goal for 2020 for virtual visits was 25,000 virtual visits. So that was, keep in mind, that was our stretch goal that was set in Q4 of 2019. As of today, in late October, we will have approached over 800,000 virtual visits. So it just dramatically changed how healthcare is being provided, the use of technology and being able to reach out to consumers quickly, virtually, to help improve care. So hopefully, you can see the next stat, only 12% of consumers without virtual or e-visit experience in the past 3 months have instead chose to visit their doctor's office in person. So you can start to see, how will virtual care in the future be utilized and incorporated into real-time visits? That's yet to be unknown. However, there are a lot of patients utilizing virtual services right now. So it's faster, quicker, easier. And as time evolves, we'll see how the virtual can be connected with the in-person to provide healthcare. So again, more to come on that in time. And just want to touch base on the avoidance of medical care because of COVID-19. So this comes to us from the CDC. So, telehealth may help people get the care they need. Again, we know that 4 in 10, so in this case, over 40% have reported avoiding medical care because of concerns regarding COVID-19. So you can start to see the impact of uncertainty, of anxiety, that has on people getting the care, getting the health care that they need. So strategically, how do we as an organization, or we as healthcare, provide that level of safety that people can feel comfortable? And that gets into a little bit again from NRC around consumers' expectations for healthcare. And again, this happened, if you go back in time, in May. So 47% of consumers feel that staff should be required to wear masks at all times. 38% of consumers said patients and visitors should be required to wear masks. 37% of consumers feel that it should be a requirement to have their temperature taken as they enter a healthcare facility, and 11% of consumers want no visitors allowed in the hospital. And 34% believe that a visitation should only happen during a high-risk time. So you start to think about then the impact that visitation has on the healing journey of patients. So again, how does that compassionate, connected care help to improve health outcomes? And what happens when we take that away? And that's what happened in healthcare. Immediately and instantaneously, all traditional forms of communication between patients, providers, and their family support was instantly severed. So the bedside conversations that used to take place in person had to be moved to virtual platforms. We had reduced visitation. We limited a rounding. So again, all of those tools that were built to improve the communication, improve safety, improve outcomes, improve experience were instantly severed. And that had a huge impact, as we saw from the news, and I'm sure that many of you have family members or friends in healthcare, especially as you look at the nursing, the physician roles, those that provide the direct patient care, had a huge psychological impact on healthcare workers. And we're seeing that play out more and more, up to and including PTSD, heightened anxiety, heightened stress, And again, they're stressed for themselves, stress about how to help their patients, and also stress, anxiety, of being frightened of accidentally bringing the virus home to their family and loved ones that impacted it. So there's a lot of stress and anxiety in healthcare workers. And then we have the public perceptions of safety measures. As we've seen again from the news or heard in conversations, there's a lot of different perceptions on masking, up to including, do masks help? Should we be mandated to wear masks? Should we not? We have social distancing, 6 feet. Is that right? Is that wrong? Do we need to expand it? Does it work? We also have screening for temperature checks and questions about symptoms, questions about potential exposures, and then if the answer is yes, what happens? So I'll talk a little bit about that on how we've used that to help improve the safety of the care that we provide. And then there's the testing. So there's a lot of pre-procedure testing that's occurring, again, to ensure the safety, not just both actual but also perceived safety. And then COVID-19 testing in the community. What roles do healthcare systems play in that? What's the extent of providing testing in the community? And then again, in the heightened surge piece, where do those resources get applied? So again, there's no easy answer. And we've been fortunate to have a very active bioethics team helping guide us through these decision making. And again, just a very impactful time now. So speaking of impactful, I'd like to share a story. This was, as I said, instantaneously communication within hospitals. The historical form of communication was instantly severed. One of those things that we did to rebuild that was virtual visits and virtual vigils. So again, if you stop to think about the organization, very large, 28 hospitals, deploying over 1,000 iPads across the organization to help patients connect with their families and their loved ones, and also provide the mechanism for their physicians, their providers, to connect with their family and as well. So I wanted to share a story. Again, the connectivity is key. This came through social media, so a Facebook post from a patient's granddaughter in Chicago. Messaged us through our social media, our Facebook page, and requested a visit with her grandmother who was in hospice care. So again, so passing away in hospice and wanted to be connected virtually. We were in a no visitation mode, so we had no visitation guidelines enacted. And while a single visitor can be there, the extended family cannot. So we were very fortunate, again, to evolve our policies quickly and ensured that no one dies alone. So within the policies, even for COVID positive patients, a visitor is allowed at end of life. So, however, their extended family is not. So the granddaughter messaged us within 75 minutes. So if we're thinking about big organization, here comes a Facebook post within 75 minutes through our virtual navigator, was able to extend keys to a Zoom room. So a Zoom room was open, virtual keys were extended not just to the granddaughter in Chicago, also to family in California and South Korea. So again, within 75 minutes of the post, was able to move the patient virtually into a Zoom room and then extend the virtual keys out literally around the world, and to connect the family and the family with their loved one at a very critical time. So I'd like to share with you, I'd like to share with you the letter that the granddaughter wrote right after. I thought it was very impactful and showed how the connectivity can help drive compassionate care. So, hi Georgia. Georgia was the virtual coordinator on that day. Hi Georgia. We were able to connect and also get our families from California and even South Korea, so all of my grandmother's children could say their goodbyes. Major props to the nurse for listening to the warbly hymns and cries. Please give her my warmest gratitude. I'm sure it was difficult physically and mentally, but we are so thankful. We may have a few much shorter calls just to see how she is and looks with just my immediate of family. So I will reach out to you to see if that's something that they want to do. You are doing amazing work. Please, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for allowing us to see her. God bless. So again, a challenging time for all. The historical lines of communication were disconnected. So how can we come together to reconnect those and to help share these special moments that people can remember for the rest of their lives? So if you go back, if you think back to that slide, what consumers expect from healthcare, and again, 47% feel that staff should always wear a mask, 38%. That said that patients and visitors should be required to wear a mask, and 37% feel that it should be a requirement to have temperature taken. So while those are good, if we were to think about the inverse, what are the other people thinking? And that's where that spectrum of beliefs is critical. So while 47% of the consumers feel they should always be required to wear a mask, 53% do not. So now you stop and think about a screener in a hospital, and as part of our policies, you are required to wear a mask for all staff, and also for all patients and visitors. So 38% of consumers said patients and visitors should be required to wear a mask. That means 62% do not. And in healthcare, at least at our hospitals, you are required to wear a mask. So how do you then train staff, team members to deal with those wide range of expectations from consumers and deal with them in real time in a stressful environment? So again, you stop and think about it. A guest is coming there, a visitor is coming there to visit their loved one in the hospital. So that's stress right there. And now start to layer in all the complexity from the pandemic, and then all these rules, and then all these signs, and all the expectations. And now you you infuse in that people's political beliefs, their personal beliefs. And then when some of those when some of those requirements are asked, for example, the mask, how do you deal with situations in real time if they start to escalate? So those are some of the components that we've worked on. It's that real-time escalation at the point of screening. And I'll talk a little bit about that briefly as we talk about the screening stations. So one of our key takeaways from inpatient experience from the pandemic is that building trust, communication drives performance. So in taking a look at the care continuum, what's that pre-communication that occurs? And our patients, their families, visitors, what are the expectations that they have prior to stepping foot on campus, if that's the pathway, or virtually through a virtual visit? What are those expectations, and how do we help to shape those before before they get on a visit virtually or before they step on to the campus. So that communication, the pre-communication is key. And then the real time. How does that real time communication occur? And if there starts to be any type of emotional response, how can we help to escalate that in real time and get support there for the employees in that conversation with either patients or their guests? So, for example, one of the stories we have, and I'm sure that everybody in healthcare has these too, and maybe some of you from other businesses, is some of the emotional, the anger that takes place when people are asked to wear a mask. So we had one. It was a visitor who refused to wear a mask. It wasn't symptomatic, but refused to wear a mask. There's no other extenuating circumstances. And when requested the third time to wear a mask, decided to throw a water bottle in the direction of one of our employees. So unfortunate incident. That said, fortunately, we had training. So every screener goes through online training, and we have security nearby that can come in and help to de-escalate in any situation. So again, the real-time escalation we found to be critically important. And that patient family-centered communication at key points in the care continuum. So one of those I talked about was that pre. Another one is our screening stations, and they'll help set the expectations as patients and guests go on to the units or into the clinic, and then how to close the visit, and then what's the post-visit visit communication. So those are the key steps that we're focusing on. Again, real-time feedback is paramount. So some of those things that we've done now is reactivated rounding on patients. Some of the rounding is virtual, depending on the patient's COVID-19 status. So we do round, some in person, some virtually. Reestablish the discharge phone calls, so making sure that that's hardwired and consistent. And then moving to a same-day question and complaint response. So again, linking in those different channels of responses that we get. Some of it is through social media, linking in the website feedback, as well as our survey feedback and the call center. So linking in all of those portals of communication that's coming in, and then making it a real-time, same-day response. So that's not to say that we effectively solve everything in a day, but we do get back personally to every complaint within a day. And our screening stations. So our screening stations were placed there to help from a safety perspective, and right now they're really evolved into our new front door, and it's a great opportunity we found to connect with patients and visitors personally. There's no longer the walk by. So while we did have concierge stations, if you will, at the front of our hospitals, there was a lot of walk by traffic. Not anymore. Now everybody has to stop, has to have their temperature taken, verbalized or through an app, a survey response, again asking about their symptoms, potential exposure. So that's an opportunity to connect. So talking and personalizing that experience. So it's a great way to greet as well as to set expectations. And again, as I mentioned prior, that real-time escalation. Real-time escalation is key. So a little bit about our journey. So again, across all of our hospitals, when we looked at the top box scores for our experience surveys and focused on likelihood to recommend. So again, by discharge date, top box, likelihood to recommend, you can start to see the essential worker spike. This was a trend that was seen nationally. Again, if you go back to April and think about the ads and the news celebrating the healthcare heroes. And we really saw that in our results as well. And you can see the downward side of that. When reality started to set in about the pandemic and people were experiencing then the disconnectedness that was caused. So for example, whereas before you could visit with your family and be with your loved one at end of life, that for many that was not an option anymore. So while there's a virtual component, there isn't that in person. The communication channels were very different and had to be rebuilt. So again, all that information that a physician takes in from patients' support network is very critical, and that's that's no longer organic. It's not just there. It has to be rebuilt and purposeful. So that was part of our challenge, how to make that a purposeful event to get that feedback from caregivers, and so the family caregivers, the support network of the patient, and then how to use that feedback that's now given and now obtained virtually. How do we embed that into the care pathways? So you can see the journey. Again, we're proud of the improvement, and we have a long ways to go. But it's great to see that the connectivity and the efforts to reconnect patients with their providers and their caregiver network appears to be having an impact. And again, this is across all of our hospitals in the 2 states. So I want to thank you so much for again and the time to be here and to share. And I just want to take place, just to share a little bit about the journey. Again, so referencing the Wizard of Oz, the Tin Man. A heart is not judged by how much you love, but by how much you are loved by others. So again, during this time, making sure we pause, are thoughtful, reach out and support people during this challenging time. We know that everybody's going through something in life, and how do we make sure that we're purposeful in connecting and empathizing? We have the lion, courage. I thought this was a very relevant quote, that there's no living thing that is afraid when it faces the danger. True courage is in facing the danger when you are afraid. So again, during this pandemic, a lot of unknowns. And how do we face that courageously and purposefully to support those and those we care for and those we serve. And the scarecrow, our brains have the ability to learn. Experience is the only thing that brings a knowledge. And the longer you are on the earth, the more experiences you are to get. So again, we're learning a lot through this pandemic, some of which is going to be definitely here for a very long time. I go back to those virtual vigils and virtual visits and stop and think, why didn't we do this before? To have the ability to connect at a very important time in somebody's life, and that's the end of life. To be able to connect them with family and loved ones and their support and their support network anywhere around the world. So it's stories like those that show that some of the projects are going to stick beyond the pandemic. So again, with Dorothy. Somewhere over the rainbow, skies are blue. So things will evolve and things will get better. And at the end of the day, to steal a slide from the Iowa Department of Public Health, there's no place like home. So again, thank you so much for the time. Take care and be safe.